It started with a trembling hand holding a champagne flute. What followed would expose a billion-dollar conspiracy, shatter the illusion of high society's safety, and transform a struggling single father into the unlikely guardian of one of the world's most powerful women. One split-second decision at an exclusive gala prevented a $10 million assassination, saved hundreds of jobs, and ignited a chain of events that would bring a criminal empire to its knees. And it all began with vigilance, instinct, and 3 black SUVs arriving at a modest apartment the next morning. The waiter who served hors d'oeuvres by night and raised his young one by day never expected his past training to resurface in a ballroom filled with crystal chandeliers and designer gowns. But when he noticed something others missed, a detail so subtle yet so deadly, everything changed. For him, for her, for an entire city that had no idea how close it came to catastrophe. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you. Make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The kitchen of Belmont Towers smelled like seared duck in desperation. Steam rose from industrial stoves while white-coated chefs barked orders in French and English, their voices blending with the clatter of silverware and the hum of industrial dishwashers. In the corner, near the service elevator, Adrian Wells adjusted his bow tie for the 3rd time that evening, checking his reflection in the polished steel of a warming station. His hands were steady, calloused from years of work that had nothing to do with carrying trays. At 34, Adrian had the kind of face that people forgot easily, which was exactly how he preferred it. Brown hair kept short and practical, a jaw that suggested he could handle himself, and eyes that noticed everything but revealed nothing. He wore the standard uniform of prestige catering: black vest, white shirt, black slacks, and shoes polished to a mirror shine. Tonight's event was the Summit Ridge Annual Gala, held on the 42nd floor of Belmont Towers in the heart of downtown Ashford. It was the kind of gathering where net worth was measured in billions, not millions, where a single handshake could seal deals worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the glittering city below. Tables draped in ivory silk surrounded a central dance floor where a string quartet played softly. Adrian had worked dozens of these events over the past 2 years since leaving his former life behind. The routine was simple: smile politely, serve efficiently, and blend into the background. He was furniture with a pulse, invisible to the guests who laughed too loudly and drank too freely. But Adrian Wells was not just a waiter. 7 years ago, he had been someone else entirely. Someone trained to read body language, assess threats, and act without hesitation. That version of himself felt like a distant memory now, buried under bills, bedtime stories, and the relentless grind of single parenthood. His daughter, Sophie, was 6 years old. She had her mother's dark curls and a smile that could light up the darkest days. Her mother, Isabel, had passed 3 years ago from an aneurysm, sudden and merciless. One moment she was laughing at breakfast, the next she was gone. Adrian had been left holding the pieces of a shattered life and a daughter who asked when Mommy was coming home. He moved to Ashford for a fresh start, taking whatever work he could find that offered flexible hours and cash in hand. Catering paid better than most options, and the late-night shifts meant he could be home during the day when Sophie needed him. His neighbor, Mrs. Kowalski, a retired schoolteacher with a fondness for crossword puzzles and soap operas, watched Sophie on gala nights. She never asked questions about his past, and he never offered answers. Tonight, Sophie had hugged him extra tight before he left. "Daddy, do you serve food to princesses?" she had asked, her eyes wide with wonder. "Sometimes," Adrian had said, kneeling to her level. "But none of them are as special as you." She had giggled and handed him a folded piece of paper. "For good luck." Inside was a crayon drawing of the two of them holding hands under a rainbow. He had tucked it into his jacket pocket, where it rested now. a talisman against the cold indifference of the world he was about to enter. The head caterer, a sharp-eyed woman named Maureen, clapped her hands twice. Listen up, people. This is not a wedding in a barn. This is Summit Ridge. CEOs, politicians, old money, new money, and everything in between. You do not speak unless spoken to. You do not linger. You do not drop anything. Understood? A chorus of "Yes, ma'am" echoed through the kitchen. Adrian picked up his tray of canapes, smoked salmon on rye with caviar and creme fraiche, and made his way through the double doors into the glittering world beyond. The ballroom was a symphony of wealth. Women in gowns that cost more than his annual rent glided across marble floors. Men in tailored tuxedos stood in clusters, discussing mergers and market trends with the casual ease of people who had never known struggle. Laughter tinkled like champagne glasses, light and hollow. Adrian moved through the crowd with practiced invisibility, offering his tray with a polite nod. Most guests took without looking, their conversations uninterrupted. He had learned long ago not to take it personally. To them, he was part of the decor, but Adrian's eyes never stopped moving. Old habits died hard. He catalogued faces, exits, patterns. It was instinctive, muscle memory from a life he had left behind. He noticed the security detail stationed near the main entrance, 2 men in dark suits with earpieces and the telltale bulge of sidearms beneath their jackets. He noted the emergency exits, the flow of foot traffic, the clusters of power brokers and their orbits of influence. And then he saw her. She stood near the center of the room, surrounded by a small entourage but somehow separate from them. Tall, poised, with sharp cheekbones and auburn hair swept into an elegant twist. She wore a midnight blue gown that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and her presence commanded attention without demanding it. She listened more than she spoke, her head tilting slightly when someone addressed her, as if weighing every word for value. Adrian didn't know her name, but he recognized power when he saw it. This was someone who made decisions that moved markets. He circled the room, refilling his tray twice, always aware of the rhythm of the event. The speeches would begin soon. The charity auction. The predictable arc of an evening designed to make the wealthy feel generous. As he passed near the bar, he noticed another waiter, younger, maybe mid-20s, with slick-back blonde hair and a nervous energy that didn't quite fit. The man's hands trembled slightly as he balanced a tray of champagne flutes. Sweat beaded on his upper lip despite the climate-controlled perfection of the room. Adrian's instincts prickled. Everyone got nervous at these events, especially the new hires. But this was different. This was fear. He filed the observation away and continued his rounds, but his attention kept drifting back to the young waiter. The man moved stiffly, his eyes darting toward the woman in the midnight blue gown with an intensity that felt wrong. Adrian positioned himself near a marble column, partially obscured, but with a clear line of sight. He watched as the young waiter approached the woman, his tray held at an odd angle. The champagne flutes tilted dangerously, but no one else seemed to notice, and then Adrian saw it. The young waiter's right hand, the one not holding the tray. His fingers twitched in a specific pattern, curling and uncurling. Not random, deliberate. A countdown. Adrian's pulse quickened. His mind shifted gears, dropping the mask of the forgettable waiter and accessing something deeper, something he had thought he'd buried for good. He scanned the room again, this time with surgical focus. 2 men near the exit, dressed like guests but standing too still, their eyes locked on the woman in blue. A 3rd man near the service entrance, his hand inside his jacket. This wasn't nervousness. This was coordination. The young waiter was less than 10 feet from the woman now, his tray lowering as if to offer champagne. But his other hand moved toward his vest, fingers reaching for something hidden beneath the fabric. Adrian didn't think. He moved, The tray of canapes clattered to the floor as Adrian closed the distance in 3 long strides, his body shifting into motion with the fluid efficiency of training that never truly faded. Guests turned, startled by the sudden commotion, but Adrian's focus was absolute. The young waiter's hand emerged from his vest, and Adrian saw the glint of metal. Not a gun. A syringe. Time compressed. Adrian's left hand shot out, catching the young man's wrist mid-motion, twisting it sharply to the side. The syringe flew from his grip, arcing through the air before skittering across the marble floor. With his right hand, Adrian drove his palm into the man's shoulder, using momentum and leverage to send him stumbling backward into a table laden with champagne flutes. Glass shattered. Screams erupted. The ballroom descended into chaos. The woman in blue stepped back, her eyes wide but not panicked. She was already reaching for her security detail, who surged forward from their positions. Adrian didn't wait for thanks or questions. His training screamed at him to assess the remaining threats. He turned toward the 2 men near the exit, but they were already moving, shoving through the crowd toward the stairwell. The 3rd man near the service entrance had vanished. Security swarmed the young waiter, pinning him to the ground as he thrashed and shouted incoherently. Adrian backed away, his heart pounding, his hands tingling with adrenaline. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maureen appeared at his elbow, her face pale. What the hell just happened? I don't know, Adrian lied, his voice steady. I just saw him pull something out. I reacted. The woman in blue was surrounded now by bodyguards and concerned guests, but her eyes found Adrian across the chaos. She held his gaze for a long measuring moment, and something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, gratitude, curiosity. Then the police arrived, and the night spiraled into questions, statements, and flashing lights. Adrian slipped away as soon as he could, retrieving his jacket from the staff room and heading for the service elevator. His hands were steady again, but his mind was racing. He had just stopped something. He didn't know what, didn't know why. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. His quiet life had just ended. The apartment Adrian shared with Sophie was a modest 2-bedroom on the 8th floor of Crescent Park Apartments, a blocky brick building that had seen better decades. The hallway smelled faintly of cooking oil and old carpet. The elevator groaned and shuddered on its way up, as if protesting every journey. It was nearly 2 in the morning when Adrian finally pushed open the door. The living room was dimly lit by a single lamp Mrs. Kowalski always left on. She sat on the worn couch, her reading glasses perched on her nose, a paperback mystery novel in her lap. She looked up as he entered, her sharp blue eyes taking in his rumpled appearance. Rough night? You could say that, Adrian said, setting his keys on the small table by the door. Mrs. Kowalski closed her book and stood, smoothing her cardigan. Sophie was an angel. Fell asleep around 8:30 after insisting I read 3 books instead of 2. Adrian managed a tired smile. She's good at negotiating. Wonder where she gets that. Mrs. Kowalski patted his arm as she passed. You look like you've seen a ghost. Get some rest. Thank you, Helen. I don't know what I'd do without you. She waved him off with a gentle smile and disappeared into the hallway, her slippers shuffling softly on the carpet. Adrian locked the door behind her and stood in the silence for a moment, letting the tension drain from his shoulders. He moved quietly down the short hallway to Sophie's room and eased the door open. She lay curled beneath her favorite blanket, the one with moons and stars, her stuffed rabbit clutched in one arm. Her breathing was slow and even, her face peaceful. He stood in the doorway watching her, the way he did most nights when the weight of the world felt too heavy. She was the reason he kept going, the reason he had walked away from his old life, the reason he worked double shifts and swallowed his pride and pretended that, Serving champagne to people who didn't see him was enough, but tonight, something had shifted. Tonight, the past had come roaring back, and he had responded without hesitation. The moment he saw that syringe, the moment his training took over, he had become someone he thought he'd left behind. He closed Sophie's door gently and walked to the small kitchen. The apartment was clean but spare. Second-hand furniture, walls that needed painting, a refrigerator covered in Sophie's artwork held up by alphabet magnets. He filled a glass with water from the tap and leaned against the counter, staring out the window at the city lights below. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw a text from Maureen. "Police want to talk to you tomorrow. 10 a.m. at the precinct. Don't be late." Adrian sighed and set the phone down. He had known this was coming. Witnesses, statements, the inevitable questions about how a waiter had moved with the precision of someone trained in hand-to-hand combat. He didn't sleep that night. He sat on the couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events in his mind. The young waiter's trembling hands, the syringe, the coordinated positions of the other men. It had been a professional operation, something far more sophisticated than a random attack, and the woman in blue, whoever she was, had been the target. By the time the sun rose, Adrian had made coffee and was staring at Sophie's drawing from the night before, still folded in his jacket pocket. Two stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. So simple, so pure. Sophie padded into the living room around 7, rubbing her eyes, her hair a wild halo of curls. "Daddy?" He turned and smiled, the exhaustion melting away at the sight of her. "Hey, sweetheart. You're up early." She climbed onto the couch beside him and snuggled into his side. "Did you meet any princesses last night?" Adrian hesitated, then nodded. "I think I might have. Was she nice?" "I didn't really get to talk to her," he said. "But I think she was someone important." Sophie yawned. "Are you going to see her again?" "I don't know," Adrian said honestly. But even as he spoke, he wondered. At 9:30, Mrs. Kowalski arrived to watch Sophie while Adrian headed to the Ashford Police Department. The building was a squat concrete structure downtown, all hard angles and fluorescent lighting. He gave his name at the front desk and was directed to a small interview room on the second floor. 2 detectives were waiting for him. The first was a middle-aged man with thinning hair and a tie that had seen better days. The second was a younger woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Mr. Wells," the man said, gesturing to a chair. "I'm Detective Carver. This is Detective Nguyen. Thanks for coming in." Adrian sat, folding his hands on the table. "Happy to help." Carver flipped open a notepad. "We've been going over the footage from last night. Security cameras caught most of what happened. You moved pretty fast. Instinct," Adrian said simply. "That's some instinct," Nguyen said, her tone neutral but her eyes searching. "You have training?" Adrian met her gaze without flinching. "I used to. A long time ago." "What kind of training?" Carver asked. Adrian hesitated. This was the moment he had been dreading. The moment where the past came knocking and demanded to be acknowledged. "I was in private security," he said carefully. "Protective services. I left the field 3 years ago." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Private security was close enough to what he had done, close enough to explain his reflexes without opening doors he wanted to keep closed. Nguyen leaned forward slightly. "The man you stopped, his name is Kyle Brennan. 26 years old. No priors, clean record. He was hired by Prestige Catering 2 weeks ago. The syringe contained a concentrated dose of potassium chloride, enough to cause cardiac arrest within minutes." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Assassination. That's what it looks like," Carver said. "The woman he was targeting is Valerie Kim, CEO of Quantum Dynamics, multi-billion-dollar tech company. She's been in the news lately, testifying before Congress about corporate espionage and stolen intellectual property. Someone wanted her dead, Nguyen said. And you stopped it. Adrian said nothing. His mind was already piecing together the implications. This wasn't random. This was calculated, professional. And if they had sent one assassin, they wouldn't stop there. We need to know if you saw anything else, Carver said. Anyone who seemed out of place. Any other suspicious behavior. Adrian thought of the two men near the exit, the third near the service entrance. He described them in detail, their positions, their movements. Nguyen took notes rapidly. We'll pull the footage and see if we can ID them, she said. Mr. Wells, Carver said, leaning back in his chair. You probably saved a woman's life last night. That's not nothing. Miss Kim's security team wants to meet with you. They'd like to thank you personally. Adrian shook his head. That's not necessary. I was just doing what anyone would do. Not anyone, Nguyen said quietly. Most people freeze. You didn't. Adrian stood. Is there anything else you need from me? Not right now, Carver said, handing him a business card. But if you think of anything else, call me. Adrian took the card and left, stepping out into the harsh sunlight. His phone buzzed again as he reached the parking lot. Another text, this one from an unknown number. Mr. Wells, this is Valerie Kim. I'd like to speak with you. Please call at your earliest convenience. Below the message was a phone number. Adrian stared at the screen for a long moment. He could ignore it. He could go back to his apartment, back to Sophie, back to the life he had carefully constructed from the ruins of his past. But something tugged at him. Curiosity, maybe. Or the nagging sense that this wasn't over. He looked up at the sky, clear and blue and indifferent, and thought of Sophie's question. Are you going to see her again? He hadn't known the answer then. But now, standing in the parking lot with the weight of a decision pressing down on him, he realized he did. He dialed the number. The call connected on the second ring. A calm, professional voice answered. Ms. Kim's office. How may I assist you? This is Adrian Wells, he said. I received a message asking me to call. There was a brief pause, then the voice shifted, warmer but still efficient. Mr. Wells, thank you for calling. Miss Kim has been hoping to hear from you. Can you hold for just a moment? Hold for just a moment? Before Adrian could answer, soft classical music filled his ear. He leaned against his car, a 15-year-old sedan with a dent in the rear bumper and a driver's side window that only rolled down halfway. Around him, the police station parking lot buzzed with activity. Officers coming and going, civilians filing reports. The ordinary machinery of law and order grinding forward. The music cut off abruptly, replaced by a voice he recognized from the Gala. Though he had never heard it speak directly, Mr. Wells. It was smooth, controlled, carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being listened to. This is Valerie Kim. I want to thank you for what you did last night. You don't need to thank me, Adrian said. I'm just glad you're safe. Safe is a relative term, Valerie said, a hint of wry humor in her tone. But I'm alive, and that's because of you. The police told me you have a background in security. Adrian tensed slightly. I did, a while ago. I'd like to meet with you, Valerie continued. In person. I have some questions, and I suspect you might have some as well. Adrian glanced at his watch. It was almost 11. He needed to get back to Sophie. But something about Valerie Kim's voice, the directness of it, the absence of pretense, made him hesitate. When? He asked. Today, if possible. I'm at the Quantum Dynamics headquarters downtown. I can send a car for you, or you're welcome to drive yourself. Whichever makes you more comfortable. Adrian thought of his battered sedan and smiled faintly. I'll drive. Good. I'll have security expecting you. Ask for James Harding at the front desk. He'll bring you up. She gave him the address and ended the call with a polite but brisk goodbye. Adrian pocketed his phone and stared at the building in front of him. This was a mistake. He knew it instinctively. Getting involved meant exposure, questions, complications. It meant risking the quiet anonymity he had worked so hard to build. But he also knew that if he walked away now, he would spend the rest of his life wondering what Valerie Kim wanted. Wondering if the men who had tried to kill her would try again. Wondering if he could have done more. He got in his car and started the engine. Quantum Dynamics occupied the top 15 floors of the Meridian Tower, a sleek glass and steel monument to innovation and ambition. The lobby was all polished marble and minimalist design, with a security desk manned by 2 guards in crisp uniforms. Adrian gave his name, and within moments, a tall man in a dark suit appeared. He had the bearing of former law enforcement or intelligence, his eyes sharp and assessing as he extended a hand. "Mr. Wells, I'm James Harding, head of security for Ms. Kim. Thank you for coming." Adrian shook his hand. "Just Adrian is fine. Follow me." They took a private elevator to the 48th floor. The ride was smooth and silent, the kind of elevator that cost more than most people's cars. When the doors opened, Adrian stepped into a world that felt a galaxy, away from his cramped apartment. The executive suite was all clean lines and muted tones. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of Ashford's skyline. Art hung on the walls, abstract pieces that probably cost 6 figures. A receptionist sat behind a curved desk, her smile polite but professional. Harding led Adrian down a hallway to a set of double doors. He knocked once, then opened them. Valerie Kim stood by the window, her back to the door. She wore a charcoal gray suit, tailored perfectly, her auburn hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. When she turned, Adrian saw her face clearly for the first time. Sharp cheekbones, dark eyes that missed nothing, and a faint scar above her left eyebrow that spoke of a past more complicated than boardrooms and balance sheets. "Mr. Wells," she said, crossing the room with an outstretched hand. "Thank you for coming." Adrian shook her hand. Her grip was firm, confident. "Please call me Adrian." "Adrian, then." "And I'm Valerie." She gestured to a pair of chairs near the window. "Please sit." He did, feeling slightly out of place in his jeans and jacket. Valerie sat across from him, her posture relaxed but her gaze intense. "I've spent the last 12 hours trying to understand what happened last night," she said. "The police have been thorough, but there are gaps. Things that don't add up." "Like what?" Adrian asked. "Like why a waiter with no criminal record would suddenly decide to kill me with a syringe full of potassium chloride," Valerie said. "The police think he was hired." "I agree. But by whom, and why now, that's what I'm trying to figure out." Adrian leaned forward slightly. "You said you've been testifying before Congress about espionage." Valerie nodded. Quantum Dynamics developed a proprietary encryption algorithm 3 years ago. It's used by governments, financial institutions, hospitals. It's extremely valuable, and someone has been trying to steal it. We've had multiple breaches, cyber attacks, even a few physical break-ins. I've been working with federal investigators to track down the source. And you think last night was connected? "I know it was," Valerie said firmly. "The timing is too convenient. We're about to finalize a deal with the Department of Defense, a $10 million contract to implement our encryption across their communications networks. If I had died last night, the deal would have collapsed. My board would have panicked, our stock would have tanked, and someone else would have swooped in to pick up the pieces." Adrian absorbed this, his mind working through the angles. Someone stands to gain a lot if you're out of the picture. Exactly. Valerie stood and walked to her desk, picking up a slim tablet. She tapped the screen a few times, then handed it to Adrian. "These are the companies that bid against us for the defense contract. Any one of them could have motive." Adrian scrolled through the list. Names he didn't recognize, corporations with sterile titles and vague descriptions. This is beyond my expertise. But you stopped it, Valerie said quietly. When trained security professionals miss the threat, you saw it. You acted. That's not luck, Adrian. That's skill. He handed the tablet back. I saw something that didn't fit. That's all. Valerie studied him for a long moment. You're being modest. James pulled your background. Not the sanitized version you gave the police. The real one. Adrian's jaw tightened. I don't talk about that. I'm not asking you to, Valerie said. But I need to know if I can trust you. You don't know me, Adrian said. I know you threw yourself into harm's way to protect a stranger, Valerie countered. That tells me more than any resume. Adrian stood, suddenly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Why am I here, Valerie? You already thanked me. The police are investigating. What do you want? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked to the window, her silhouette framed by the sprawling city below. I want to hire you, she said finally. Adrian blinked. Excuse me? Valerie turned to face him. I have a security team. They're good, but they're trained to handle external threats, cyber attacks, corporate espionage. What happened last night was different. It was personal, intimate. Someone got close enough to touch me, and none of my people saw it coming. You did. I'm a waiter, Adrian said. I serve hors d'oeuvres and refill wine glasses. I'm not a bodyguard. You were a bodyguard, Valerie said. Among other things. And whether you want to admit it or not, you still are. It's in the way you move, the way you assess a room. You can't turn that off. Adrian shook his head. I have a daughter. A life. I walked away from that world for a reason. I understand, Valerie said, her tone softening. And I'm not asking you to go back to it. I'm asking for your help, temporarily, just until we figure out who's behind this and neutralize the threat. I'll pay you well. Very well. It's not about money, Adrian said. Then what is it about? He met her eyes. It's about keeping my daughter safe. Getting involved in your world, your problems, that puts her at risk. Valerie nodded slowly. You're right. It does. But doing nothing doesn't make you safe either. Whoever tried to kill me last night knows you stopped them. They saw your face. It's on security footage, probably already circulating. If they're as organized as I think they are, they'll come for you too. Not because you're a threat, but because you're a loose end. Adrian's blood ran cold. He hadn't considered that. He had been so focused on protecting Sophie by staying out of trouble that he hadn't realized trouble might already be coming for them. You're saying I'm already involved, he said quietly. I'm saying you became involved. The moment you stepped in, Valerie said. But if you work with me, I can protect you. I have resources, connections, people who can make sure you and your daughter stay safe. Adrian turned away, running a hand through his hair. His mind raced, weighing options, calculating risks. Everything he had built, the quiet life, the stability, it all felt suddenly fragile. I need to think about it, he said finally. Of course, Valerie said. But don't take too long. The people who want me dead are still out there. And now, whether you like it or not, they know about you too. Adrian left quantum dynamics with more questions than answers. As he rode the elevator down, he couldn't shake the image of Sophie sleeping peacefully in her bed, unaware of the storm gathering around them. By the time he reached his car, his phone was ringing. It was Mrs. Kowalski. Adrian, there are men here, she said, her voice tight with worry. 2 of them. They're asking about you. His heart stopped. Where's Sophie? She's fine. She's in her room. But these men, they're not police. They said they just want to talk, but something feels wrong. They just want to talk, but something feels wrong. Lock the door, Adrian said, already starting the car. Don't let them in. I'm on my way. He ended the call and floored the accelerator, weaving through traffic with a single-minded focus. The 15-minute drive took 8 when he reached Crescent Park Apartments. He took the stairs 2 at a time, his pulse pounding in his ears. The hallway was empty, but he could hear voices coming from his apartment. He reached the door and found it ajar. Inside, Mrs. Kowalski stood near the couch, her face pale. 2 men in dark suits stood in the center of the living room, their expressions calm but their presence menacing. Adrian stepped inside, his body coiled with tension. Get out. One of the men smiled, a cold, humorless expression. Mr. Wells, we just want to talk. I said get out. The second man took a step forward. You made a mistake last night, interfering in things that don't concern you. Walk away now, and there won't be any problems. Adrian's voice dropped to a deadly calm. You have 3 seconds to leave before I make you leave. The first man laughed. You think you can take both of us? Adrian didn't answer. He simply moved, his training taking over. He closed the distance in 2 strides, his fist driving into the first man's solar plexus with precision. The man doubled over, gasping for air. Before the second could react, Adrian grabbed his wrist, twisted it sharply, and used the momentum to slam him against the wall. I said leave, Adrian repeated. His voice ice. The first man staggered to his feet, and both men retreated to the door. Their bravado shattered. This isn't over, one of them muttered. Yes, it is, Adrian said. Because if I ever see you near my home or my daughter again, you won't walk away. They left, and Adrian slammed the door behind them, locking it and sliding the deadbolt into place. Mrs. Kowalski was shaking. Adrian, what's going on? He turned to her, his expression softening. I'm sorry, Helen. I never meant for this to happen. Sophie appeared in the hallway, her eyes wide. Daddy? Adrian crossed the room in an instant, scooping her into his arms. It's okay, sweetheart. Everything's okay. But as he held his daughter close, he knew the truth. Nothing was okay. And the only way to fix it was to do the one thing he had sworn he would never do again. He had to fight. The morning after the confrontation, Adrian sat at his small kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Sophie was still asleep, her door closed, the apartment wrapped in the kind of silence that felt more like waiting than peace. He had spent the night checking locks, testing windows, and positioning himself where he could see both the front door and Sophie's room. Old instincts had fully awakened now, no longer dormant, but alert and humming with purpose. His phone sat on the table in front of him, Valerie Kim's number still displayed on the screen. He had typed and deleted 3 different messages, each one an attempt to find words that could somehow explain what had happened, what he needed, what he feared. Finally, he just pressed call. She answered on the first ring. Adrian. They came to my apartment, he said without preamble. 2 men. They threatened me in front of my neighbor while my daughter was in the next room. A pause. Then Valerie's voice, sharp and controlled. Are you both safe? For now. I convinced them to leave. Convinced, Valerie repeated, and he could hear the understanding in her tone. I'm sending James and a security team to your location. They'll be there in 20 minutes. That's not necessary, Adrian started. Yes, it is, Valerie interrupted. And we both know it. Give me your address. He did, because arguing felt pointless and because somewhere in the sleepless hours of the night, he had already made his decision. 23 minutes later, 3 black SUVs pulled into the parking lot of Crescent Park Apartments. Adrian watched from his window as James Harding emerged from the first vehicle, followed by 4 others, all moving with the coordinated efficiency of professionals. Adrian met them in the hallway. James's expression was grim, but not surprised. Miss Kim briefed me, James said. We're going to do a security assessment of your apartment and the building. Then we're moving you. Moving me where? Adrian asked. Somewhere secure. Ms. Kim has a property outside the city. Private, gated, full surveillance. You and your daughter will stay there until this situation is resolved. Adrian shook his head. I'm not uprooting my daughter's life. With respect, Mr. Wells, your daughter's life is already at risk, James said quietly. Those men know where you live. They know your routines. Staying here is not an option. Mrs. Kowalski appeared in her doorway, wringing her hands. Adrian, I don't understand what's happening, but those men yesterday, they frightened me. Adrian turned to her, his expression softening. I'm sorry, Helen. I never wanted to bring trouble to your door. You didn't bring anything, she said firmly. You helped someone. That's who you are. But please, if there's somewhere safer for you and Sophie, you should go. The decision crystallized in that moment, not because he wanted it, but because he had no choice. Keeping Sophie safe was the only thing that mattered, and pride or stubbornness couldn't stand in the way of that. All right, Adrian said. Give me an hour to pack and explain things to Sophie. James nodded. We'll secure the perimeter. Take your time. Adrian went back inside and gently woke Sophie. She rubbed her eyes, her hair a wild tangle, and looked up at him with sleepy confusion. Daddy? It's still early. He sat on the edge of her bed. I know, sweetheart. But we're going on a little trip. Her eyes widened with interest. Like a vacation? Sort of, Adrian said carefully. We're going to stay at a nice place for a little while. It has a big yard and lots of space to play. What about school? Sophie asked. We'll figure that out. Right now, I just need you to trust me. Can you do that? Sophie studied his face with the unnerving perceptiveness that children sometimes possess, seeing past words to the truth beneath. Are we in trouble? Adrian pulled her into a hug. No, baby. We're not in trouble. But I need to keep you safe, and this is the best way to do that. She nodded against his chest. Okay, Daddy, I trust you. They packed quickly, filling 2 suitcases with clothes, toiletries, and Sophie's most treasured possessions. Her stuffed rabbit, her favorite books, and a shoebox full of drawings. Adrian added his own essentials, along with a locked case he pulled from the top shelf of his closet. Something he had hoped never to open again. By the time they emerged from the apartment, James had positioned his team at strategic points throughout the building. One of the SUVs had been brought to the front entrance, its engine running. Mrs. Kowalski met them in the hallway, pressing a small package wrapped in aluminum foil into Adrian's hands. Blueberry muffins. Sophie's favorite. Sophie hugged her tightly. Thank you, Mrs. K. I'll miss you. I'll miss you too, darling, the older woman said, her eyes glistening. She looked at Adrian. You take care of each other. Always, Adrian promised. The drive out of the city took 40 minutes. The convoy of SUVs moving in formation through morning traffic and eventually onto a highway that wound through rolling hills and dense forests. Sophie sat beside Adrian in the back seat, watching the landscape change from concrete and glass to green and gold. It's pretty out here, she said softly. It is, Adrian agreed, though his eyes remained on the road behind them, watching for tails. For anything out of place. The property was exactly as James had described, private, gated, and surrounded by tall stone walls that spoke of both wealth and security. The main house was a sprawling modern structure of glass and timber, set on at least 10 acres of manicured lawn and natural woodland. A smaller guest house sat near a pond, connected to the main residence by a stone pathway. Valerie Kim stood on the front steps of the main house as the SUVs pulled up the circular drive. She wore jeans and a cream sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, looking more approachable than she had in her boardroom armor. Adrian stepped out first, then helped Sophie down. The little girl looked around with wide eyes, taking in the expanse of space and beauty. "Wow," Sophie breathed. Valerie approached with a warm smile. "You must be Sophie." "I'm Valerie." Sophie looked up at her father, then back at Valerie. "Are you the princess from the party?" Valerie laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise even her. "I'm not a princess, but I am very happy you're here." "Do you have swings?" Sophie asked hopefully. "I do, actually," Valerie said. "Out back. Would you like to see?" Sophie nodded enthusiastically, and Valerie extended her hand. After a moment's hesitation, Sophie took it, and the two of them walked toward the side of the house. James appeared at Adrian's elbow. "The guest house is fully stocked. Bedrooms, kitchen, everything you'll need. We've installed additional security measures overnight, cameras, motion sensors, panic buttons in every room. You'll have 2 guards posted at all times, rotating shifts." Adrian watched Valerie and Sophie disappear around the corner of the house. "This is a lot. Ms. Kim doesn't do things halfway," James said. "And she takes threats seriously, especially when they involve people who've helped her." "I'm not her responsibility," Adrian said. James gave him a measured look. "Maybe not. But she's made you one anyway." The guest house was indeed fully stocked with a master bedroom, a smaller room perfect for Sophie, a modern kitchen, and a living area with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the pond. Someone had even thought to include toys and books for Sophie, arranged on a shelf in her new room. Adrian unpacked mechanically, his mind elsewhere. This wasn't his life. This wasn't the quiet existence he had built. But as he heard Sophie's laughter drifting through the open window, he realized that maybe his old life had been an illusion anyway. A temporary shelter that was always going to collapse under the weight of who he used to be. That evening, Valerie invited them to dinner at the main house. The dining room was elegant but not ostentatious, with a long wooden table and a view of the gardens through massive windows. A private chef had prepared the meal. Simple but expertly crafted: roasted chicken, vegetables, fresh bread. Sophie sat between Adrian and Valerie, chattering about the swings and the ducks she had seen on the pond. Valerie listened attentively, asking questions and engaging with genuine interest. After dinner, Sophie fell asleep on the couch in the living room, exhausted from the day's excitement. Adrian carried her back to the guest house, tucked her in, and returned to find Valerie standing on the terrace. Looking out at the darkening sky, he joined her silently, the two of them standing side by side in the cooling evening air. "She's wonderful," Valerie said quietly. "You've done an incredible job with her." "I've done my best," Adrian said. "It's not always enough." "It's more than enough," Valerie countered. She turned to face him. "I meant what I said yesterday. I want to hire you. Not just as security, but as a consultant. Someone who can help me understand the threats I'm facing and how to counter them." Adrian was quiet for a moment. "You don't need me for that. You have James, a whole team." "I need someone who thinks differently," Valerie said. "Someone who sees what others miss. You proved that at the gala." "And if I say yes," Adrian said slowly, "what happens to Sophie?" "She comes first, always." "I understand that," Valerie said. "She can stay here safe with full-time care if needed. Or she can be with you, depending on the situation. I'll adapt to whatever you need." Adrian studied her face in the dim light. "Why are you doing this?" "Really?" Valerie hesitated, then spoke with careful honesty. "Because for the first time in a long time, someone acted without wanting something from me. You didn't know who I was. You didn't care about my company or my money. You just saw someone in danger and you helped. That's rare in my world, Adrian. And I don't want to lose it." He understood then. This wasn't just about security or business. This was about connection. About finding someone who operated on a different frequency than the corporate sharks and political operators she dealt with daily. All right, Adrian said. I'll help you. But we do this my way. No corporate bureaucracy, no committees. If I tell you something's wrong, you listen. Valerie extended her hand. Deal. They shook, and in that moment, both of them knew that something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't employer and employee. This was partnership. The next morning, James briefed Adrian in a secure room in the basement of the main house. The walls were lined with monitors showing security feeds from around the property. A large table in the center was covered with files, photographs, and documents. This is everything we have on the attempt at the Gala, James said, spreading out the materials. The assassin, Kyle Brennan, hasn't talked. He lawyered up immediately. But we've been digging into his background. Adrian studied the photographs. Brennan looked ordinary, forgettable. Exactly the kind of person who could blend into a catering staff without raising suspicion. His bank account shows a deposit of $50,000 2 weeks before the Gala, James continued. Came from an offshore account that we're still trying to trace. He also rented a storage unit under a fake name. We got a warrant this morning. What was in it? Adrian asked. James pulled out a photograph showing the interior of a storage unit. Inside were surveillance photos, dozens of them, all of Valerie. Leaving her office, getting into her car, at restaurants, at home. Someone had been watching her for months. Adrian's jaw tightened. This wasn't opportunistic. This was planned. Exactly, James said. Someone wanted detailed intel on her routines, her security, her vulnerabilities. Brennan was just the trigger man, so who hired him? Adrian asked. James pulled out another file. We have 3 primary suspects. All of them are competitors who lost out on the defense contract. The first is Apex Security Solutions, run by a man named Victor Gaines. Former intelligence officer, connections in dark places. The second is Titanium Encryption, owned by a consortium of foreign investors. And the third is Redline Technologies, headed by someone you might find interesting. He slid a photograph across the table. Adrian picked it up and felt his blood run cold. The man in the photo was in his 50s, silver-haired, with sharp features and eyes that held a calculating coldness. Adrian knew that face. He had seen it before years ago, in a very different context. His name is Colton Hayes, James said. CEO of Redline Technologies. Made his fortune in defense contracts and private military companies. He's been trying to acquire Quantum Dynamics for 3 years. Valerie keeps refusing his offers. Adrian set the photo down carefully. I know him. James's eyebrows rose. You know Hayes? Not personally, Adrian said. But I know of him. Back when I was in protective services, his name came up in connection with some operations that weren't exactly legal. Arms deals, mercenaries for hire, regime change consulting. He operates in gray areas. That tracks with what we found, James said. He's got the resources, the motivation, and the moral flexibility to order a hit. Adrian studied the surveillance photos of Valerie again, seeing the pattern, the meticulous preparation. This isn't just about a business deal. Hayes doesn't strike me as the type to stop because one attempt failed. Agreed, James said. Which is why we need to be proactive. We can't just wait for the next attack. Adrian looked up. What does Valerie want to do? She wants to draw him out, James said. Make herself visible, force him to make a move. Then we catch him in the act. That's suicide, Adrian said flatly. That's why she needs you, James replied. To make sure it's not. Adrian stood, pacing the room. Every instinct screamed that this was a bad idea. But he also knew that hiding wouldn't solve anything. Hayes would keep coming, keep trying, until either he succeeded or someone stopped him. Set up a meeting, Adrian said finally. With Valerie. We need to talk strategy. James nodded. Already done. She's waiting for you upstairs. Adrian found Valerie in her office, a bright space filled with natural light and minimalist furniture. She stood when he entered, her expression expectant. "James told you about Hayes," she said. "He did," Adrian confirmed. "And he told me your plan." "It's reckless." "It's necessary," Valerie countered. "I can't live in hiding. I have a company to run, people depending on me. If I disappear, Hayes wins by default. And if you die, he wins permanently." Adrian shot back. Valerie's eyes flashed. "I'm not asking for permission. I'm asking for your help to do this safely." Adrian held her gaze, seeing the determination there, the refusal to be made a victim. He recognized it because he had felt it himself, that moment when you decide that survival isn't enough, that you have to fight. "All right," he said. "But we do this smart. No public appearances without advance planning. No predictable patterns. And you listen to me when I tell you something's too dangerous." "Agreed," Valerie said. "And one more thing," Adrian added. "We need to understand Hayes better. His operations, his people, his weaknesses. If we're going to draw him out, we need to know exactly what we're dealing with." Valerie nodded slowly. "I can get you access to corporate intelligence files. Financial records, business dealings, anything that's public." "That's a start," Adrian said. "But I'm going to need more than public records. I'm going to need to go deeper." "How deep?" Valerie asked. Adrian's expression was grim. "Deep enough to see the things Hayes doesn't want anyone to see." Over the next 3 days, Adrian immersed himself in the world of Colton Hayes. Valerie had granted him full access to Quantum Dynamics Intelligence Database, a sophisticated system that compiled information from public records, financial filings, news reports, and anonymous tips. What emerged was a portrait of a man who had built an empire on the edge of legality, always careful to keep his hands clean while others did the dirty work. Adrian worked from a secure office in the main house, surrounded by monitors and files. Sophie was being cared for by a kind woman named Teresa, whom Valerie had hired specifically for the purpose. The little girl seemed to be adjusting well, spending her days exploring the property, drawing pictures, and occasionally visiting Adrian to show him her latest creations. One afternoon, she bounded into the office with a drawing of a castle surrounded by dragons. "Look, Daddy, the princess lives here and the dragons protect her." Adrian smiled, pulling her onto his lap. "That's beautiful, sweetheart. Are the dragons scary?" "No," Sophie said seriously. "They're nice dragons. They only scare away bad people." Adrian kissed the top of her head. "That's good. Everyone needs nice dragons." After Sophie left, Adrian returned to his research, but her words lingered. Dragons protecting a princess. It wasn't far from the truth of what he was trying to do. That evening, Valerie joined him in the office. She had spent the day in virtual meetings with her board, managing the fallout from the assassination attempt and reassuring investors that quantum dynamics remained stable. She looked exhausted, her usual composure frayed at the edges. "You should rest," Adrian said, glancing up from his monitors. "I'll rest when this is over," Valerie replied, sinking into a chair across from his desk. "What have you found?" Adrian pulled up a series of interconnected documents on the main screen. "Hayes is smart. He uses shell companies, offshore accounts, and intermediaries to keep his name off anything questionable. But there are patterns." He highlighted several transactions. Over the past 5 years, Redline Technologies has acquired 6 smaller companies, all in the security and encryption space. Each acquisition happened after the target company faced some kind of crisis. A cyber attack here, a sudden loss of key personnel there, financial troubles that appeared out of nowhere. Valerie leaned forward, studying the screen. "You think Hayes engineered those crises?" "I think Hayes creates problems so he can offer solutions," Adrian said. "And when companies are desperate, they sell cheap. That's predatory, Valerie said, her voice tight with anger. But not illegal. No, Adrian agreed. Which is why he's been able to operate for so long. He stays just on the right side of the law, or at least on the side where prosecution is too complicated to pursue. Valerie stood, pacing the room. So how do we stop him? Adrian turned in his chair. We make him desperate. Right now, Hayes thinks he has the upper hand. The assassination attempt failed, but you're still vulnerable, still a target. He'll try again, but he'll be cautious. What we need is to force him into making a mistake. How? Valerie asked. By threatening what he values most, Adrian said. His reputation. His empire. If we can expose his methods, show the world what he really is, then even if he succeeds in eliminating you, he'll have destroyed himself in the process. Valerie stopped pacing and looked at him. You want to go public. Release everything we found. Not everything, Adrian said. Just enough to raise questions. Enough to make investors nervous, to make law enforcement start looking closer. Hayes has spent years building an image of legitimacy. If we crack that image, the whole structure could collapse. Valerie considered this, her mind working through implications. That's risky. If we accuse him without concrete proof, he could sue us for defamation. Tie us up in legal battles for years. We don't accuse him directly, Adrian said. We just ask questions. Release the pattern of acquisitions, the timing of corporate crises, the web of shell companies. Let journalists and investigators connect the dots. Valerie sat back down, her expression thoughtful. It could work, but it would take time to prepare, to make sure we're not exposing ourselves legally. We have time, Adrian said. Hayes doesn't know we're onto him. He thinks you're in hiding, scared. We use that. Let him think he's won the first round. A slow smile spread across Valerie's face. I like it. It's bold, aggressive, not what he'd expect. Good, Adrian said. Because predictable is dangerous. We need to stay ahead of him. They worked late into the night, drafting strategy. Identifying key journalists and investigators who might be interested in the story. Planning how to release information without it being traced directly back to quantum dynamics. At some point. Valerie ordered food from the kitchen, and they ate at the desk, surrounded by papers and glowing screens. The conversation drifted from strategy to more personal territory. Can I ask you something? Valerie said, setting down her coffee cup. Sure, Adrian replied. Why did you leave protective services? James mentioned you were highly skilled, well-regarded. That's not the kind of career people usually walk away from. Adrian was quiet for a moment, then spoke carefully. I had a daughter who needed me more than the job did. And I'd seen enough darkness that I didn't want to bring any of it home to her. But you're back in it now, Valerie observed. Because it came to me, Adrian said. I didn't choose this. But I'm not going to run from it either, not when it puts Sophie at risk. Valerie nodded slowly. I understand that. Protecting what matters. I feel the same way about my company. It's not just about money or success. It's about the people who work for me, the families that depend on those jobs. If I let Hayes win, I'm not just losing a business. I'm failing hundreds of people. Adrian studied her, seeing past the CEO exterior to the person underneath. You care more than you let on. I have to, Valerie said. Caring is seen as weakness in my world. Show too much emotion, and people think you're not tough enough to lead. So I learned to hide it. But it's still there. I can see that, Adrian said softly. Their eyes met across the desk. And something unspoken passed. Between them, recognition, understanding, the beginning of trust that went deeper than professional collaboration. Valerie broke the moment first, standing and stretching. It's late. We should both get some rest. Adrian nodded, saving his work and shutting down the monitors. They walked together to the front door of the main house, where the night air was cool and filled with the sound of crickets. "Thank you," Valerie said. "For everything. For staying, for helping, for not running when you had every reason to." "You're welcome," Adrian said. "Though I think we're past the point where either of us could run even if we wanted to." Valerie smiled. "Probably true." She hesitated, then added, "Sophie told me today that I remind her of a princess in a castle." Adrian chuckled. "She's been on a fairy tale kick lately. Don't take it personally." "I don't," Valerie said. "Actually, I find it charming. It's been a long time since anyone saw me as anything other than a CEO or a target. Being someone's princess, even a 6-year-old's, it's nice." Adrian smiled. "She has good instincts about people. If she likes you, that means something." "Then I'll consider myself honored," Valerie said. They said good night, and Adrian walked back to the guest house, his mind turning over the day's work and the unexpected warmth of the evening's conversation. Inside, Sophie was asleep, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. Adrian sat on the edge of her bed, watching her breathe, feeling the weight of responsibility settle over him. Like a familiar coat, he had walked away from his old life to protect her from exactly this kind of danger. Now here they were, in the middle of a corporate war, surrounded by security teams and surveillance systems, preparing to take on a man who killed without hesitation. But as he looked at Sophie's peaceful face, he realized something important. He wasn't doing this just to survive. He was doing it to show her that when bad things happened, you didn't just hide. You stood up. You fought back. You protected the people who couldn't protect themselves. It was a lesson his own father had taught him, years ago, in a very different context. And now he was passing it on, not through words, but through action. He kissed Sophie's forehead and whispered, "Sleep well, sweetheart. The dragons are watching." The article appeared on a major financial news website exactly 1 week after Adrian and Valerie finalized their strategy. The headline was measured, carefully worded to avoid legal liability. Questions emerge about Redline Technologies' acquisition practices. The piece laid out the pattern Adrian had identified. The suspicious timing of corporate crises. The web of shell companies, the aggressive buyouts. It didn't accuse Colton Hayes of anything illegal, but it raised enough red flags that other journalists began digging deeper. Within 48 hours, 3 more articles appeared, each one peeling back another layer of Redline Technologies' operations. Financial analysts started questioning the company's valuation. Investors began asking uncomfortable questions during earnings calls. Adrian watched the fallout from his office, monitoring news feeds and social media. Valerie sat beside him, her expression a mixture of satisfaction and apprehension. "It's working," she said. "His stock is down 8%. "That's just the beginning," Adrian replied. "The real test is how he responds." They didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, James entered the office with a tablet in hand, his expression grim. "We have a problem." He pulled up a video and hit play. It showed Colton Hayes at a press conference, standing behind a podium with the Redline Technologies logo prominently displayed. He looked calm, composed, every inch the successful executive. "These recent articles are nothing more than a smear campaign orchestrated by competitors who can't succeed in the marketplace," Hayes said, his voice smooth and confident. "Redline Technologies has operated with complete integrity for over 20 years. We have created thousands of jobs, contributed millions to charitable causes, and provided essential services to government and private sector clients alike. I will not allow baseless insinuations to damage the reputation we've worked so hard to build." The camera flashed as reporters shouted questions. Hayes raised a hand. "I want to address one rumor specifically," he continued. "There have been suggestions that I had something to do with the recent attempt on Valerie Kim's life. Let me be absolutely clear. I condemn that attack in the strongest possible terms. Ms. Kim and I may be business rivals, but I would never wish her harm. In fact, I've reached out to her personally to offer my support and resources in finding whoever is responsible." Valerie's jaw tightened. "He's good. He's turning this around, making himself look like the victim and the hero." Adrian's eyes remained fixed on the screen. "He's also sending a message. He knows we're behind the articles. He knows we're behind the articles." James nodded, "and he's not taking it lying down. Our intelligence team picked up chatter this morning. Hayes has mobilized his own security contractors, former intelligence operatives, military personnel. He's building a response team." "For what?" Valerie asked. "For us," Adrian said quietly. "He's going to come after you again, but this time he's going to be smarter about it. No more hired assassins. He'll use people he trusts, people who are loyal to him." Valerie stood, pacing to the window. "So we're back where we started." "No," Adrian said. "We're ahead. We've rattled him, made him react. Now we see what he does next, and we stay 2 steps ahead." That night, Adrian couldn't sleep. He stood on the terrace of the guest house, staring out at the dark expanse of the property. Security lights illuminated the perimeter, and he could see the silhouettes of guards patrolling at regular intervals. His phone buzzed. A text from James. "Motion sensors triggered on the east fence. Team is investigating." Adrian was already moving, pulling on boots and grabbing a jacket. He sent a quick message back, "On my way." He ran toward the main house, his breath visible in the cold night air. James met him halfway, flanked by 2 security personnel. "What do we have?" Adrian asked. "Could be an animal," James said. "But the pattern doesn't fit. 3 separate triggers within 2 minutes, evenly spaced. That's not natural movement." They reached the east fence, a 10-foot barrier topped with security cameras and motion sensors. One of the guards pointed his flashlight into the woods beyond. "There," he said. Adrian saw it too, a brief flash of movement, too deliberate to be wildlife. Someone was out there, testing their defenses. "Lock down the property," Adrian ordered. "All personnel on high alert. And get Valerie to the safe room." James was already radiating commands into his comm unit. Within minutes, the property transformed into a fortress. Lights blazed. Guards took up defensive positions. The main house sealed its reinforced doors and windows. Adrian stayed at the fence line, watching the dark woods, his instincts on high alert. Whoever was out there had withdrawn, but the message was clear. Hayes knew where they were, and he was probing for weaknesses. By dawn, the property was secure, but no one had relaxed. Adrian stood in Valerie's office as she reviewed security footage from the night before. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. "They were testing us," she said. "Yes," Adrian confirmed. "Seeing how we respond, how fast, how coordinated. They'll use that information to plan the real attack." Valerie turned to face him. "Then we don't wait for the real attack. We go on offense." Adrian raised an eyebrow. "What do you have in mind?" "Hayes is hosting a charity gala next week," Valerie said. "Big event, lots of press, political figures, business leaders. He's using it to rehabilitate his image after the articles." "What if I attended?" Adrian's expression hardened. "That's exactly what he wants. You walking into his territory, surrounded by his people." "Maybe," Valerie said. "But it's also an opportunity. He won't try anything with that many witnesses, that much scrutiny. And we can use the event to gather intelligence, see who he's working with, identify his key players." "It's too dangerous," Adrian said flatly. Valerie met his eyes. "Everything about this situation is dangerous. But I'm not going to hide while Hayes destroys everything I've built. I'm going to that gala, Adrian. The question is whether you're coming with me." Adrian stared at her, seeing the determination that had probably built her company from the ground up. The refusal to be intimidated or controlled. He understood it because he felt it too. The instinct to meet threats head-on rather than cower. If we do this, he said slowly, we do it my way. Full security detail, advanced reconnaissance, exit strategies planned to the minute. And at the first sign of trouble, we extract immediately. No heroics, no speeches, we leave, Valerie nodded. Agreed. And one more thing, Adrian added. Sophie stays here, with double the security. This doesn't touch her, ever. Of course, Valerie said. I would never put her at risk. Adrian exhaled, already running through tactical scenarios in his mind. This was a terrible idea, but it was also the only way forward. Over the next 3 days, Adrian prepared for the gala with military precision. He studied the venue, a historic mansion on the north side of Ashford that Hayes had rented for the evening. He mapped entry and exit points, identified security cameras, planned routes through the building. James coordinated with a team of undercover operatives who would be positioned throughout the event, disguised as guests, waitstaff, and even members of Hayes' own security team. They would have eyes everywhere. Valerie worked with her stylist to select an outfit that was elegant but practical, nothing that would restrict movement or slow an escape. She also wore a small panic button disguised as a bracelet, linked directly to James and Adrian. The night before the gala, Adrian sat with Sophie in the guest house, reading her a bedtime story about a brave knight and a clever princess. She listened with rapt attention, her eyes growing heavy as the story reached its conclusion. "Daddy," she murmured as he tucked her in, "are you going to protect the princess tomorrow?" Adrian smiled sadly. "I'm going to try, sweetheart." "You will," Sophie said with absolute confidence, "because you're the bravest person I know." He kissed her forehead, his heart aching with love and fear in equal measure. "Sleep well, baby. I'll be back before you know it." As he left her room, he wondered if that was a promise he could keep. The next evening, Adrian stood in front of a mirror in the main house, adjusting his bow tie. He wore a tailored tuxedo, the kind of formal wear he hadn't put on in years. Concealed beneath the jacket was a compact sidearm, legal but uncomfortable. Valerie appeared in the doorway, and Adrian's breath caught. She wore a deep emerald gown that was both stunning and understated, her hair swept up to reveal the elegant line of her neck. But it was her eyes that held him, fierce and focused. "You look ready," he said. "I am," she replied. "Are you?" Adrian gave a slight nod. "As ready as I'll ever be." James drove them to the gala in an armored sedan, part of a 3-car convoy. The drive was tense, silent except for occasional updates from the security team via radio. As they pulled up to the mansion, camera flashes exploded around them. Reporters lined the red carpet, shouting questions. Adrian stayed close to Valerie, his eyes scanning constantly, categorizing faces, noting positions. Inside, the mansion was breathtaking, all crystal chandeliers and polished marble, filled with the city's elite. A string orchestra played softly in the corner. Waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres, and standing near the center of the room, greeting guests with practiced charm, was Colton Hayes. He saw them immediately. His smile didn't waver, but something flickered in his eyes, recognition and calculation. He crossed the room with confident strides. "Ms. Kim," Hayes said, extending his hand. "What a pleasant surprise. I'm so glad you felt safe enough to attend." Valerie shook his hand, her smile equally polished. "Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Hayes. It's important to show that business rivals can still be civil." Hayes's gaze shifted to Adrian. "And you've brought security. Very wise in these uncertain times." Adrian said nothing, just met Hayes's eyes with a level stare. The older man's smile tightened slightly. "Well, please enjoy the evening," Hayes said. "I hope we can have a conversation later about how we might work together rather than against each other." "I'd like that," Valerie said smoothly. Hayes moved on to greet other guests, but Adrian could feel the man's attention still on them, watchful and calculating. That was a warning, Adrian murmured. I know, Valerie replied. Let's make sure we're ready for whatever comes next. They circulated through the room, engaging in polite conversation, all while Adrian's team fed him constant updates through a nearly invisible earpiece. So far, nothing out of the ordinary. But Adrian's instincts were screaming that something was wrong. It was too quiet. Too normal. And then midway through the evening, the lights went out. The darkness lasted only 3 seconds before emergency lighting flickered on, casting the ballroom in an eerie amber glow. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as guests clutched their champagne glasses and looked around in confusion. Adrian's hand was already on Valerie's arm, pulling her toward the nearest exit. His earpiece crackled with James's voice. All teams, code yellow. Possible electrical failure, investigating now. But Adrian knew better. This wasn't an accident. We're leaving, he said quietly to Valerie, before they could move. Colton Hayes appeared on the small stage at the front of the room, holding a microphone. His voice was calm, reassuring. Ladies and gentlemen, please don't be alarmed. We've experienced a minor power fluctuation. Our backup generators are online, and full power will be restored momentarily. In the meantime, please enjoy the ambience of our historic candlelit setting. Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. Waiters began lighting candles on tables. The string quartet resumed playing. Adrian's jaw tightened. Hayes was too composed, too prepared. This had been planned. James, Adrian spoke quietly into his cum unit. Status on that power failure? Main breaker was manually switched off, James replied. Someone accessed the electrical room. We're reviewing security footage now. Adrian scanned the room, noting the positions of Hayes' security team. They had repositioned during the blackout, forming a subtle perimeter that now included the exit Adrian had been heading toward. We're boxed in, Valerie whispered, reading his expression. Not yet, Adrian said. Stay close and follow my lead. He guided her toward the opposite side of the ballroom, moving with the casual ease of a guest simply mingling. They reached a set of French doors that opened onto a terrace. Adrian tested the handle discreetly and found it unlocked. They stepped outside into the cool night air. The terrace overlooked manicured gardens lit by strategically placed spotlights. Adrian immediately spotted 2 of their undercover operatives positioned near the garden entrance. His earpiece crackled again. Adrian, we've got a problem. 3 vehicles just pulled up to the service entrance. Unknown individuals, armed. This is not part of Hayes' official security. Adrian's pulse quickened. How many? At least 8, possibly more. They're moving toward the building now. Valerie's hand found his. What's happening? Hayes made his move, Adrian said. We need to go now. He activated his cum unit. James, we need immediate extraction. Terrace exit, west side. Copy that. 2 minutes out. But 2 minutes might as well have been 2 hours. The French doors burst open behind them, and 3 men in dark suits stepped onto the terrace. They weren't holding weapons, but their intentions were clear in the way they moved, coordinated and purposeful. Adrian positioned himself between them and Valerie. Gentlemen, we're just getting some air. The lead man, thick-necked with cold eyes, shook his head. Mr. Hayes would like to speak with Ms. Kim, privately. Ms. Kim isn't interested, Adrian replied evenly. It wasn't a request, the man said. Taking a step forward, Adrian didn't wait for him to take another. He moved with explosive speed, closing the distance and driving his palm into the man's sternum. The impact sent him stumbling backward into his companions. Run! Adrian shouted to Valerie. She didn't hesitate, sprinting across the terrace toward the garden stairs. Adrian was right behind her, but the 3 men recovered quickly. Giving chase. They reached the garden just as one of their undercover operatives intercepted the pursuers. A brief scuffle erupted. giving Adrian and Valerie precious seconds to reach the perimeter wall. A black SUV screeched around the corner, James at the wheel. The passenger door flew open, and Adrian practically threw Valerie inside before jumping in after her. "Go!" he shouted. James floored the accelerator, the SUV's tires spinning on the gravel before finding traction. Behind them, the mansion erupted in chaos as more of Hayes's men poured out of the building. Valerie was breathing hard, her elegant updo coming loose, her face flushed. "He tried to take me. Right there, in front of everyone. He created the perfect distraction," Adrian said grimly. "Power failure, confusion, and in the chaos you disappear. By the time anyone realized what happened, you'd be gone." James navigated through side streets, taking random turns to ensure they weren't being followed. All teams extracted safely. No casualties on our side. Hayes's people are scrambling, but they lost us. Adrian looked at Valerie. "You were right. He's desperate. And desperate men make mistakes. But we got what we needed," Valerie said, pulling a small device from her bracelet. "While you were dealing with those men, I activated the recording function. I got Hayes on audio instructing his security to detain me. That's kidnapping, Adrian. That's a crime we can prove." Adrian stared at her, impressed despite the adrenaline still coursing through his system. "You planned this. You wanted to provoke him." "I wanted evidence," Valerie corrected. "And now we have it." The safe house was different from Valerie's estate. A nondescript building in an industrial area with reinforced walls and a sophisticated security system. James had moved them there immediately after the gala. Rotating security teams and implementing full communication blackout protocols. Adrian sat in a sparse room with concrete walls, reviewing the audio recording Valerie had captured for the third time. Her voice was clear. "I'd like to leave now, Mr. Hayes." And his response, equally clear, "I'm afraid I can't allow that, Ms. Kim. We have some matters to discuss. And I insist you stay until we've reached an understanding." Then the sound of footsteps. Multiple men, and Hayes's final instruction. "Take her to the study. Make sure she's comfortable, but not free to leave." It was damning. Combined with the security footage James's team had obtained showing Hayes's men physically blocking exits and pursuing them through the gardens. They had enough to involve law enforcement at the highest levels. Valerie entered the room, having changed from her gown into jeans and a sweater. She looked exhausted but determined. "I just spoke with my attorney. He's already reaching out to the FBI. With this evidence, they'll have no choice but to investigate Hayes for attempted kidnapping, conspiracy, and possibly the assassination attempt." "Good," Adrian said. "But Hayes knows what you have. He'll be preparing his defense, spinning the narrative. We need to be ready for his next move." "What if there is no next move?" Valerie asked. "What if we've already won?" Adrian shook his head. "Men like Hayes don't surrender. They escalate." As if to prove his point, his phone buzzed with an alert. It was a news notification. "Breaking. Colton Hayes accuses Valerie Kim of corporate espionage. Files criminal complaint." Adrian showed her the screen. Valerie's face paled as she read. "He's claiming I stole proprietary technology from Redline. That the assassination attempt was staged to gain sympathy and cover up my crimes. He's filed a formal complaint with the Sikh and local authorities." "It's a smokescreen," Adrian said. "He's trying to muddy the waters, make it look like a business dispute rather than criminal activity." "But it's working," Valerie said, scrolling through her phone. "My board is panicking. Investors are selling off stock. The media is treating both accusations as equally credible." Adrian stood, pacing the small room. "Then we need to move faster. Get your evidence to the FBI before Hayes can bury it in legal motions and counter-accusations." Valerie nodded, already dialing her attorney. As she spoke in urgent tones, Adrian stepped outside into the hallway where James was coordinating with the security team. "We've got a problem," James said before Adrian could speak. "One of our safe houses was compromised an hour ago. The one in the North District. No one was there, but it was swept clean, professionally done. Hayes is hunting for us. How did he find it?" Adrian asked. "We're investigating, but it suggests he has access to information he shouldn't. Possibly a leak in our organization or sophisticated surveillance we haven't detected." Adrian's mind raced through possibilities. "We need to move again, soon, and we need to vary the pattern. No more predictable safe houses." "Agreed," James said. "But there's something else. Your apartment in the city was broken into this morning. Nothing was taken, but it was searched thoroughly." Adrian's blood ran cold. "Sophie, she's safe," James assured quickly. "Still at the estate with full security. But Hayes is sending a message. He knows about your daughter." The world seemed to tilt. Adrian had known this was a possibility, had prepared for it. But hearing it confirmed made it real in a way that bypassed rational thought and went straight to primal fear. "I need to see her," Adrian said. "That's not advisable," James began. "I wasn't asking." Adrian interrupted, his voice hard. "I need to see my daughter, now." James studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I'll arrange secure transport. But you'll need to be back within 3 hours. We're moving locations at dawn." The drive to the estate felt endless. Adrian sat in the back of an armored vehicle, his mind cycling through worst-case scenarios. Hayes was no longer just targeting Valerie. He was targeting everyone connected to her, using fear and intimidation to isolate her. When they arrived at the estate, Adrian went straight to the guest house. Sophie was in her room, coloring at her small desk. She looked up when he entered, and her face lit up with pure joy. "Daddy!" She launched herself at him, and he caught her, holding her tight enough that she squeaked in protest. "You're squishing me." "Sorry, sweetheart," he said, loosening his grip but not letting go. "I just missed you." "I missed you too," Sophie said. "Are you done protecting the princess?" "Not yet," Adrian said. "But I will be soon. I promise." Sophie pulled back to look at him, her small hands on his cheeks. "You look tired." "And worried." "I'm okay," Adrian lied. "Mrs. Teresa says when people are worried, they need hugs and hot chocolate." Sophie tugged his hand. "Come on. I'll make you some." In the kitchen, Sophie carefully prepared hot chocolate with an adult's supervision, explaining each step with solemn importance. Adrian watched her, memorizing every detail. The way her tongue stuck out slightly when she concentrated. The proud smile when she handed him the mug. The warmth in her eyes that reminded him so much of her mother. "Daddy," Sophie said, climbing into his lap, "when this is all done, can we stay here? I like the ducks." Adrian's throat tightened. "This isn't our home, sweetheart. We'll go back to our apartment when it's safe." "But what if Ms. Valerie wants us to stay?" Sophie asked. "She told me yesterday that having us here makes the big house feel less lonely. And I could have my own duck. We could name it Quackers." Adrian smiled despite everything. "We'll see. Right now I just want to make sure you're safe and happy. Right now I just want to make sure you're safe and happy." "I am," Sophie said simply, snuggling against his chest. "Because you're here." They sat like that until Sophie's eyes grew heavy and she dozed off in his arms. Adrian carried her to bed, tucked her in, and sat watching her sleep until James appeared in the doorway. "It's time," James said quietly. Adrian kissed Sophie's forehead one last time and whispered, "I love you, baby." More than anything, the FBI raid on Redline Technologies happened at dawn. Adrian and Valerie watched it unfold via secure livestream. From their new location, a penthouse apartment in downtown Ashford that belonged to one of Valerie's trusted board members. Federal agents in tactical gear swarmed the building, executing search warrants for both the corporate offices and Colton Hayes' personal residence. News helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting every moment to a captivated audience. Hayes was escorted out of his home in handcuffs, his silver hair disheveled, his usual composure shattered. He shouted something at the cameras about persecution and false accusations, but the agents guided him firmly into a waiting vehicle. Valerie exhaled slowly, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "It's really happening." "It's a start," Adrian said cautiously. "But Hayes has resources. He'll make bail within hours and hire the best defense team money can buy." "Let him," Valerie said with quiet steel. "We have the evidence. The audio recording, the security footage, the financial records linking him to the assassination attempt. The truth is on our side." By noon, the story had exploded across every major news outlet. The narrative had shifted dramatically. Hayes was no longer the respected CEO defending his reputation. He was the desperate criminal who had tried to eliminate a rival through violence and intimidation. Valerie's attorney held a press conference, presenting a carefully curated selection of evidence that painted a damning picture. The audio recording of Hayes ordering Valerie's detention played on a loop across news networks. Legal experts weighed in, almost unanimously agreeing that Hayes faced serious criminal charges. But the most powerful moment came when Valerie herself stepped in front of the cameras. She stood on the steps of Quantum Dynamics headquarters, flanked by her legal team, and spoke with calm authority. "For months, I've been targeted by a man who believed he could take what I built through intimidation and violence. He was wrong. Today, justice begins its course. But this isn't just about me. It's about every person who has been threatened, every company that has been undermined by unethical practices, every individual who thought they had no choice but to surrender to power. We do have a choice. We can stand up, we can fight back, and we can win." The speech went viral within hours. Social media erupted with support. Other CEOs who had been victims of Hayes' predatory practices came forward with their own stories. A movement had begun, one that demanded accountability from those who operated above the law. Adrian watched from the penthouse as Valerie handled interview after interview with grace and strength. She had transformed from a target into a symbol, proof that courage and integrity could triumph over corruption. That evening, as the media frenzy finally began to calm, Valerie returned to the penthouse. She looked exhausted but also lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. "It's over," she said, sinking onto the couch beside Adrian. "Hayes' empire is crumbling. His board voted to remove him. His investors are fleeing. Even his legal team is reconsidering their representation. He's finished. And you're safe," Adrian said. Valerie turned to him, her eyes soft. "Because of you. None of this would have been possible if you hadn't been there that night at the gala. If you hadn't seen what no one else saw." "I just did what needed to be done," Adrian said. "No," Valerie said firmly. "You did what very few people would have the courage to do. You risked everything, your safety, your daughter's peace, your quiet life, because it was right. That's extraordinary, Adrian. You're extraordinary." Before he could respond, his phone rang. It was James. "Adrian, you need to turn on the news. Channel 7. Adrian grabbed the remote and switched on the television. A news anchor was speaking. Urgently, in a stunning development, Colton Hayes has been denied bail following testimony from a former employee who claims Hayes ordered the assassination of Valerie Kim and maintained a criminal enterprise spanning multiple states. The judge cited Hayes as a flight risk and a danger to public safety. He will remain in federal custody pending trial. Valerie's hand found Adrian's, squeezing tight. "It's really over." "Yes," Adrian said, finally allowing himself to believe it. "It's over." 3 months later, Adrian stood in the driveway of Valerie's estate, watching Sophie chase ducks around the pond. The morning was crisp and bright. The kind of day that felt like a promise. The guest house had become their home, not temporarily, but permanently. Valerie had insisted, and for once, Adrian hadn't argued. Sophie had thrived here, enrolled in an excellent school nearby, making friends. Flourishing in the space and safety the estate provided. Valerie emerged from the main house, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Adrian and stood beside him, watching Sophie's delighted laughter echo across the water. She named another duck, Valerie said with amusement. This one's called Sir Quaxalot, Adrian chuckled. She has a gift for names. They stood in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from shared experience and deep trust. Over the past months, their relationship had evolved into something neither had expected, a partnership that extended beyond business or security into genuine companionship. Valerie had offered Adrian a permanent position at Quantum Dynamics, heading a new division focused on corporate security and ethical business practices. He had accepted, finding purpose in work that mattered, that protected people and upheld integrity. Sophie had taken to calling Valerie V, shortening it affectionately. The two had formed their own bond, Valerie teaching Sophie about technology and business, Sophie teaching Valerie about imagination and joy. I got the final report from the FBI this morning, Valerie said. Hayes pled guilty to all charges. Conspiracy to commit murder, attempted kidnapping, racketeering. He's facing 30 years minimum. Good, Adrian said simply. And the defense contract came through, Valerie continued. $10 million, exactly as projected. We start implementation next month. That's because you never gave up, Adrian said. Even when it would have been easier to walk away. Valerie smiled. I learned that from you. Standing up even when you're afraid. Especially when you're afraid. Sophie ran up to them, breathless and beaming. Daddy V, come see what Sir Quaxalot can do. He's the smartest duck ever. They followed her to the pond, listening to her elaborate explanation of duck intelligence. As the morning sun climbed higher, casting gold across the water, Adrian realized something profound. He had spent years running from his past, trying to build a life that was safe and small and controllable. But in one moment, prompted by instinct and courage, everything had changed. He hadn't just saved Valerie's life. He had reclaimed his own. He had shown Sophie that strength meant standing up for others, that safety wasn't found in hiding, but in facing challenges with integrity. And in the process, he had found something he thought was lost forever, a future that felt full of possibility rather than just survival. That evening, as they sat on the terrace watching the sunset, Sophie between them, Valerie spoke quietly. I never thanked you properly, for everything. You don't need to, Adrian said. I do, Valerie insisted. You gave me my life back. You gave me hope that good people still exist. You gave me a family I never knew I needed. Sophie looked up at both of them. Are we a family? Adrian and Valerie exchanged glances, something unspoken passing between them. Yes, sweetheart, Valerie said gently. I think we are. Sophie smiled, satisfied, and returned her attention to the sunset. Adrian felt Valerie's hand slip into his warm and certain, and in that moment, watching the sky turn purple and gold, he understood that sometimes the most important battles aren't fought with weapons or strategy. They're fought with courage, integrity, and the willingness to stand up when no one else will. It had started with a trembling hand holding a champagne flute. It had ended with justice, safety, and an unexpected family forged in the crucible of danger and trust. And as the stars began to appear above them, Adrian knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Not as warrior and client, not as protector and protected, but as equals, as partners, as family. The way it was always meant to be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us. from us.